Tucker, and this is episode number 350 of WP Watercooler.
350.
Yeah, and so 350. It's one of those landmark. We can kind of say 350. All right, we're halfway to 400, and because of that, let's talk a little bit about maintenance. So let's go around the room real quick, get everyone introduced. Steve, tell us about yourself.
I am Steve Zengit. I am the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress meetup.
Awesome. Good to have you. Russ, how about you?
Hey, what's up? I'm Russell Aaron. I'm a developer in Las Vegas, and I am a co-organizer of the WordPress meetup group and WordCamp Las Vegas. And, excited to be on my comeback tour, I kind of feel like.
Your comeback tour?
having kids, man, back to back. You guys kind of take 2 years off, and now I kind of feel like I'm diving back into the swing of things,
Awesome, man. Good to have you. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog. I do this show as well as another show called WP Blab. We just recorded that at 9 o'clock this morning, and so feel free to go take a look at that. We talked about
busy, man.
I know, man. We talked about personal branding and branding of your websites and your social media and all that fun stuff. And if you're someone who is going to brand yourself as the as the topic of the site or any of those sorts of things, or if you're going to be branding it as your company, and then why you should do one or the other. So yeah, go take a look at that. We had a good time with that, and that's an hour-long show. This one's only half an hour, so let's dive in real quick. So let's talk a little bit about maintenance.
We've never talked about this before.
We've never talked about maintenance. I mean, 350 episodes. I think we've probably talked about maintenance maybe
on
a dozen
325
times.
of them.
Right?
I thought we could take a step back and define maintenance, right? I think there's different levels of maintenance, right? So we've talked about things like Manage WP or some of the other maintenance companies that are out there. But
Main WP?
Yeah. Is that always what maintenance is?
Hell no. Dude. Because I think what you're getting at is you can form this idea of maintenance, and you would think, okay, they're going to keep my posts, my pages, my whatever, and that's the idea of maintenance. But I think there's flavors of maintenance. It could be code, it could be content.
Strawberry.
Yeah. But I mean, it could just be customizer. I mean, I think what Steve's getting at is there are so many different avenues of what support is. How do we, say this is what the definition of support is?
And is maintenance always support?
No, man.
No.
I mean, you just use them interchangeably. That's why I'm asking, right?
Of course. Yeah, sure. I think maintenance, when you think, I worked for Maintain, a company that is all about maintenance, and I had a thing called Geek Street that I started in 2012, which is all about maintenance. And the point is, I look at my own websites and I'm like, what am I trying to do today? I have plugins that need to be updated, right? I know I have backlinks that are not going to my analytics, that are not, my campaign isn't working. I'm not tracking users. I think of maintenance that way. This is what my website is supposed to be doing, and it's not. So we need to go hit maintenance.
Okay.
Yeah. That could that could be one of them, because the fact that if you're wanting to clean up all of those backlinks, clean up all of the, if you have custom post types sort of floating around that you want to get rid of, if you have old content you want to get rid of and kind of do some redirection and that sort of thing, maybe that's maintenance stuff too.
Maybe get rid of some functions. You copied over everything in your functions PHP that you hand wrote, you brought over to your new theme, and maybe you're not writing your author meta that way anymore. Sure.
So, I mean, we just segmented. We just went over a whole bunch of segments of maintenance, right? Oh.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. You can interrupt. What were you going to say?
I'm following you. We did cover a lot.
We covered a lot. So let's talk to the layperson, right, who is not technical, right, who may be listening right now and doesn't even know what this is, right? Doesn't even think about maintenance. They set up a website. It's working. Kind of, right? Yeah. It's working, and all right, I can go on to the next thing, right? Sure. Does that person have to maintain their website?
I think you should.
It was a loaded question.
it's a very loaded question, but I think you should overall know what is going on with your website, but you don't have to know the finite details about it.
Okay, I'm gonna say it's a hard yes. Everybody that has a WordPress website has to maintain their website, right? Whether it's you doing it, your host doing it, whether you hire somebody like Russ to do it, right? There is some level of maintenance that everyone should do, right? I said has to do, but should do is really the right statement, right?
Sure.
So you should always be maintaining your website because there's always something that is changing, right? At a minimum, your WordPress core code is going to get updated at some point, right? And so there are security patches that come out all the time. Those security patches are important, right? And so those things should be applied to your website, right? Now, if you have a functions file like Russ described that you've wrote some old code, or you're using a handwritten theme, or you're using an outdated theme or outdated plugins, right? What I just described might not be a small task, right? Yeah. Because sometimes if those things happen and core code gets updated, your site can break.
Yeah. It's kind of like you don't have to change the oil in your car. You don't have to. No one tells you have to change oil in your car. Like you can keep driving your car until it breaks and dies, and then you buy another car and you drive some more until that one breaks and dies, and you buy another car. But when it comes down to it, your website at some point is going to break because PHP is going to change. That's like the underpinnings of the entire thing, which would be like if we were all driving on the street and then flying cars came out and you had to update your car to be a flying car, it'd be like that. It's like you have to do this. Okay, maybe that's the case. Or autonomous vehicles. There's that whole layer of it.
Do I have to change the oil in my flying car? We lost Russ. We scared him away.
Just dump it.
I mean, that's a perfect analogy, right? At some point, your website is going to just fail, right? At some point, right? It may be years, right? But at some point, your website is going to fail, and it's gonna start getting worse and worse over time, right? Probably because if you're not maintaining these things, right? And so you do have to keep the code up to date, core code, plugins. And if you happen to have a handwritten theme or a theme that somebody else provided, right, that theme itself is going to need updates as the core code changes, right? And that's true of a handwritten theme or a theme that you've purchased from a premium theme company, because those things get updates as well.
Well, because you're talking like the way that we sanitize and verify data. So when those functions change, everything's got to change. Or when we start using different namespaces or whatever, like all that is part of it. And I want to add on that when you start getting into the world of using third-party services, like maybe Stripe to handle your e-commerce or Tag Manager, as they progress, your site has to progress to either embed them or to handle the transaction, or it's an always moving thing because APIs and terms of agreements are getting written all the time and updated.
I think third-party services is a whole other bucket. I think you're absolutely right. Third-party services is a whole other bucket. So what I was talking about was internal core code changing for security patches. External services, those things change constantly, right? So if you're using a plugin that is tied to a third-party service, right, and that third-party service changes, but your plugin didn't change or you didn't update your plugin, now it's just going to break, right? Yeah. So that's a whole other bucket. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I mean, we've all heard it. Can you just simply take my Twitter feed and show it up on my website? Can you just simply take the events that are happening on my Facebook feed and just show those on the website? And you're like, yes, I can. Right now, it will work fine. But the second somebody at Facebook or Twitter goes, let's just change our API real fast, and they change your API and you hand wrote a bunch of code, things stop working and you're stuck.
Well, I mean, I think, on top of that, like there are passwords, and when it gets to technology, there are secrets and codes and things to authenticate. So that is a whole other separate as well. Like, and I think that's the core of what I was getting at is like, every website, even though we all kind of do the same thing, which is, have an e-commerce site, sell something and ship it, you, me, and Jason are going to do things completely different. And the tools that we're going to use, they're going to get us there, but they're completely different.
Absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. I had a new client,
but we're still using Jetpack.
I had a new client I was talking to yesterday, and they said, I heard some things about WordPress. We heard from this other developer that WordPress changes often, right? And they just make changes, right, on the code, and then the site just breaks, right?
Yeah.
And I said, yes, that happens, right? And I said, so there's a couple reasons for that, right? If somebody isn't updating their code or maintaining their site, yes, things could break. Or if you're using code that isn't following WordPress best practices, that has the opportunity to break, right? And so I said, so yes, I said, but that's actually true of every system, right? That's not unique to WordPress, right? So that is what you just described is a web issue. It's a software issue. It's not a WordPress unique issue.
Yeah, and going back to what you were talking about with e-commerce stuff, and our show obviously isn't an e-commerce specific show, but the idea of e-commerce, if you take a look at it from the standpoint of we've all been into a store before, right? We've all gone into a store. We've walked around the store, we collected items, we put them in our basket, we went up to the front, and took all my items out and says, I'd like to pay for these. And you give them the card, they try to swipe the card and it doesn't swipe. Doesn't work. You try to dip the card in, doesn't dip. You try to Apple Pay, doesn't work. Whatever it is you got, Google Pay, whatever. None of those things work. That part of it right there is that transaction. The bag. You put the bag around the card. So you try all those things, and that card will not go through the system. That part right there is those APIs that's connecting from your
authentication
system to Stripe to whoever it is you're using for your payment gateway.
So using that, if something isn't working, there's two things here. There's my website that sends data and their website that receives it. So you got to determine, you can't call Stripe and be like, hey, is your stuff on point? And I don't want to fix mine until you verify. So you got to go fix your own stuff. And you got to be like, all right, even if this is the new lay of the land and there's no documentation, I'm still responsible for getting that data to Stripe.
So we've talked about sort of the code bucket, right, of maintenance, right? So yes, code is an important part of maintenance, and you need somebody that understands WordPress code to maintain the code of your website. But I think Russ brought up a great point, right? And that is how the traffic is working, right? Content I was going to go next, right? But I'm really talking about that traffic piece, right? So how do people get to your website, and how is your SEO structured, and how are the backlinks working? And I think that's a whole other bucket of maintenance.
But that's what I would say, maintenance is like, you're building this website, and maintenance is maintaining what you're doing and staying in your lane or keeping, the lights on. Like maintenance is like going through and combing through and being like, don't need it. Jason, you just did it with your servers. Don't need this, don't need that, new wires here. Like that's maintenance, man.
That's maintenance.
Do you just yank out wires at random?
I did. I was just yanking out wires. I yanked out a whole bunch of wires. It was awesome.
Don't cut the
red wire. It kind of looks like a Cuban dance. He's just like.
Well, and with that maintenance, Steve, there's also testing that's involved in that as well, because just because you go and update your plugins, you go in there and you say, I'm going to check all 300 of these plugins that I have installed, and I'm going to hit update. And I'm going to cover my eyes, and I'm going to count to 10, and then the whole place is going to break, or it's all going to work. But at some point, you need to go back and test all that stuff. Make sure the stuff's actually working correctly when you're doing that maintenance. And if you remove a plugin, you remove a function, you remove a whatever, something probably is going to break.
You remove a permalink, right?
Yeah.
You change a permalink. I mean, the stuff I'm talking about is what Russ touched on, right? So you change something, right? So one of the plugins that you might remove or change is something like redirection or simple 301 redirects, right? Or if you're not maintaining that regularly, right? And so you change a permalink, you've now not just screwed with your website, you've screwed with Google. Right. And so now people can't get to the stuff that they clicked on, which is bad.
Yeah. I want to say that like what you're doing here is like when you're updating something, like this ties back to the show that we were talking about with the roadmap and the plugin. Like you need to read the change log when something comes out, and it says this is what we did. And like you're like, now that Stripe does this, you're gonna have to go into your account. You're gonna have to go apply these settings, because even if you update this plugin, you still got to go do something on their end. And like that's why I get so mad at developers, because I'm like, tell me the steps of what you did to solve this, because you've already been down this road. I haven't been. Don't send me down a 2-hour thing of trying to figure out because I updated
my site's broken.
It's there. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like
my site's broken. Go fix it.
Tell me, something. But like you were saying, like you can't just hit update and expect it to work, because maybe it works on your site, but it's not working. The output isn't correct, or it's not getting something. You could just change the name of an option, and now that it's a blank option in your table, and there's no setting because you have to go in and reset it. I mean, it could be something. For me, that sounds stupid, but for like Steve said, a layperson, and a missing option sounds like the hardest thing to solve right now.
Well, but what you've identified was if you don't know where it is, right? You're now on the hunt, right?
It's harder now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where having the ability to have a staging server, or to have a local copy of it and having that running. Speaking of which, you can go use ServerPress Makers a desktop server, and you could use WP Site Sync to sync that into your local website and get that all set up and figured out, and then push it back out to ServerPress, or push out back out to your web host and kind of do that as well. So you have those sorts of things that you can do, and you need to have those in place. So yeah, staging server, and especially doing something on local would be good too.
So I mean, it's something where you have to learn what you're doing. Like you don't just install WordPress. Like WordPress has to be installed on top of things like PHP and Nginx or Apache. Like that's just what makes it work. That's just how a server runs. So I mean, at some point you have to kind of understand that could be maintenance too. Do I got to update my PHP? There's so many things that maintenance talks about.
So the last,
can we talk about content?
Yeah, the last bucket is really content, right? And so a lot of my clients that have kind of just set up a website and walk away. Right. And never change it. Right. Because once you got a website, it's just there. Right.
Yeah. So we do this at the Plaza. So we have comedy shows at the Plaza. So we're always adding comedians to the list of, on our page. Right. Well, today the show ended. So, I need to go onto that page and remove the comedian from this page and go remove them from wherever they're at. Like that's maintenance as well. We do that very well. Like it's not pool season right now. We have to go to our page and update and say the pool will open in May or whatever, like there's content changes. And especially where I come from in the mortgage world, like as new laws are written about Fannie and Freddie Mae, or how like your interest rate changes, I had to go back through and update my content, or else my website is now giving out false information. I mean, look at our own WordPress stuff. There is content, there's articles written from 2009 that say this is how the WordPress filter thing works, and like it's outdated because that was in 3.8 and we're on 5.3. I mean, there's all that out there, like that's content that needs to be updated, or else your site is no longer going to be that authority.
Yeah. Well, and that's important just because it's the right thing to do, right? But it's also important for Google, right? So if you don't update your site regularly, Google's going to ding you for that, right? You're just going to fall off the ranking. And so if you're not, Google likes fresh content, and it likes ever-changing content. It likes to know that your site is active. That's just how the algorithm works, and it's the right thing to do. Go ahead.
I want to make I want to make a T-shirt that says I like my website's active.
So a lot of these different pillars we are talking about are things that can be not done by just one person, but rather you could divvy this stuff up. You could say, my content creators, I need you to go through all your content and make sure that the internal linkings between stuff is being updated. Hey, developer person, I need you to go in and make sure all my plugins stay up to date. And hey, web host, I need you to make sure that the web hosting stuff's all set up correctly. And all three of those can kind of talk to one another to get things working the way that they need to.
I'm going to say it a little bit more harsh, right? You shouldn't have the same person doing all three of these things, right? Those are different skill sets, right? So if you do have the same person doing all three of those pillars that we talked about that Jason just identified, you should be changing, right? And so you need somebody that understands code to do your code maintenance. You need somebody that understands SEO to do your backlinking and your redirects and all that kind of stuff, maintenance. And you need a content person.
Yeah.
I'm going to go between you guys, and I'm going to say that
we're not arguing.
But I have met people in the WordPress space, and you know, our own Topher Kenobi. I trust Topher with anything server, code, content. Like, I have met people that are very tech savvy. Rachel Wise is another one. She was on WP Lab. She can lay down that entire thing. She does it from PPC all the way to code. So, you know, hiring the right people is probably the better message. You know, you can have one, you should probably have two, but you can have a good one solid, you know.
Yeah.
Look, I those unicorns are out there, right?
But the content part,
that's not typical.
Sure.
Like,
right?
Somebody who's great at writing JavaScript is probably not the
Rachel,
person to be writing your content.
Right. Rachel Weisz is a unicorn. Let's just I think we could say that and stand behind that on this show. Right.
So
yeah.
So when you're setting all this stuff up, you also need to kind of schedule these things out as well. So either setting up maintenance windows for it or figuring out like a time frame that you want to do this. We get into spring cleaning at some point here where everyone's going to be like, oh, we need to start changing stuff and start working on things.
Don't cowboy that.
Yeah.
Don't just go to your live site and be like, you know, do I really need to have EDD active? You know, let's just deactivate it real quick.
Yeah.
We're not selling stuff anymore anyhow. Whatever. Click.
Hey, don't.
Hey, Mark, are we using Give WP? No, all right, delete it. You know, like,
I don't need WooCommerce.
Hey, we're not doing that. We're not doing MailChimp, right? All right, cool.
So don't do that. Don't do that.
You know, interesting. The other thing that we talked about the layperson, and you know, I want to talk about support from the company side, because Steve, you have a company and you do offer support for the code that you write, and you know, you're always going to work with your clients and you're always going to help solve the problem. And I worked for a maintenance company, and it was all about, you pay us and we will do this. And you know, and then there's people like Jason who probably has 5 or 6 clients and he offers support, and that's a company, an actual like structured thing. And then there's the privateers, right? And what I think I want to say is, I think people who are privateers have an advantage. Like, there's a lot of companies that can't give you a discount, or you know, they want you to pay for them backing up your site. So, you know, for me, what I would do is, if I'm just Russell and I have, you know, WordPress support, whatever, I would give my clients a discount if you're using a host that is doing backups for you. That takes time off of my hands, and I want to reward you. I will take $5 off my monthly thing because you're using a service that I trust, and you're using, you know, ServerPress, and you're using a staging site. Like, everything you're doing, like, you know, I want to reward people for following these things, and I think that you could do that, and you could, you know, like, build an honest support thing and get people moving in the right path. And I think that would bring a different kind of change to WordPress, you know, because everything is like, oh, you don't have maintenance? Oh, we'll do this for you. But I think you can go and get your own a la carte thing and put them together. And, you know, your maintenance plan might not be a backup, and it might not be updating plugins. I can do that. My maintenance plan might be this other thing with Nginx or servers, or, you know, whatever it may be. So I think from the company side, there's a lot of different avenues that there's maintenance that the maintenance companies aren't doing right now, you know?
Yeah.
How do you guys feel?
No, I feel that that's good, because I think a lot of times people will go and hire somebody to do the maintenance on their website, not realizing that their web host is already doing all of those things, and that person knows it already, and they're like, they're good. I don't need to do backups. We already have backups. The web host does the backups. We're good. updates. They get an email saying, WP Engine sends them an email saying, hey, that plugin you're running super old, has some vulnerability in it. Make sure you go and do your update.
Right.
Like that sort of thing.
I mean,
It's being the one who's smart enough to know when they push update that they need to do a backup beforehand. They need to do the update. They need to run a bunch of tests and make sure things work.
I think I'm saying, like, in the WordPress space,
Yeah.
the first thing I tell people is before you do anything, make a backup. And so I want you to be on a host that does that. I'm on a host that does that. WP Engine does it for me, and they keep a backup of staging and production. Like, that's how they roll. Shout out to WP Engine. All I'm saying is, like, I don't need that backup plan, or I don't, I'd rather have the 40 minutes extra of your time that it takes to go run that backup, because you're going into a managed WP and you have to click all these things and track and do whatever. I'd rather say, let them handle it, and your time is better used on this for me. What
do you think, Steve?
I don't know anybody who's running manual backups. If you're paying somebody that's sitting there and pushing a button to run manual backups, then you should have automated backups.
But even, okay, so I maintain, like, we use managed WP, and I still had to go in there and I still had to click the buttons to update the plugins. Like, you got to go in and, like, check boxes, and you got to do that. And then if the site breaks, so all I'm saying is, like, getting off of that, there's other ways to okay, go ahead.
Our maintenance is a little bit different, right? So our maintenance is we build a project and then we maintain it. We maintain all aspects of it. So we actually turn off all of the automated plugin updates on both WP Engine and Liquid Web. We don't allow them to update plugins. We allow them to update core code. WordPress core is fine, but when it comes to plugins, we go through a pretty rigorous testing process on a local server and on a staging server before we push a plugin update, because those things have a tendency to break the site, right? So I don't like those automated plugin updates because we don't know how it's going to affect things, right? I'll give you an example. WooCommerce subscriptions just got a major update, right? We haven't rolled that out yet because we're still in the testing process. Right. Not that I think anything's going to go wrong with it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's what we do when we go through major plugin updates. Just the same with major core WordPress core updates, right? And so we're a little bit more specialized maintenance but we don't. We don't offer maintenance as a service. It's not something I advertise. We'll maintain this website that somebody else is developing. That's just not what we do. We maintain the websites that we develop.
So I've met you before, Steve. I can say I know a little bit about this. I can say I know a little bit about your theory here, and what you're saying is sometimes you will find a software that will get you 70% of the way, and then you got to write the other 30%. So that's why you don't allow updates, is because what you have written or what your team has developed here works, and you want to control that, because if something changes, you're going to catch it before it ever gets updated, and that's different than I have a cat blog, or I like to share pictures of my graffiti and so update my plugins, and those are two huge things.
Yeah, we're building pretty highly specialized enterprise websites, so we're just, it's a different tier.
I've done both, right? So I have my own website, and I've worked for a company like Maintain, and now I'm at the Plaza, which is a hotel, and there's different data that I've never worked on data at Maintain. I've never worked at data that I'm doing here. This is bookings, and this is people coming to stay with us and getting lines of credit to come gamble and get markers and stuff like that. Like, I'm working with a lot of things. So, my theory on this has changed, because I used to be the person, hey, hit update, it will do it. Now I have everything on Git. I have everything on, it has to be a manual push, and it's got to do this, and everything just has to lock down. I'm leaning more towards Steve this way.
I imagine if you break a database that screws with somebody's marker, then someone's going to be pissed off somewhere.
And I hear that they bust your kneecaps, and that happens in Vegas anyhow.
No, I didn't say that. I'm
not in Vegas. Russ is in Vegas. It's on Russ if that happens.
No. Nobody said that. Everybody's good. Everybody's cool.
Joey.
Everybody's fine. Everybody's fine. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. Put your pieces down. But it is one of those things. Like, what I'm saying is, like me of the past, I used to be very adamant about you can update on local. You should be able to update on staging, because if it breaks, you can just, bring your database back over. You can rebuild your staging environment in so many ways, unless you have like a lot of special scripts that do things that can never get to production. That's a different story. But, like my theory about this now is that, you, unless you have a really good core understanding of what your site does, you need to have these local staging, production, maintenance things in place until you get it so down to where you're just dreaming about your website and you can just put it together like, quickly. Like,
and with that,
but it's fine. We can end.
I want to know I want to know what your follow up was.
All right, Steve, go for it.
I was going to say, I mean, the difference is, right, rather some of the sites that you talked about were just sites where if it went down, nobody was affected, right? But now you're working on sites that actually affect the business
a lot,
right? And so that there you have critical functions that are happening on the website where if you make a change and some piece of it goes down that you didn't realize went down, you're now talking about costing the company money, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
And
reputation.
And your reports are off, and people aren't getting the right data. Like, it's a lot.
So, folks, with that, I want to say thank you very much. I do want to do a quick little public service announcement for both of you, Steve and Russ. This is it right here, guys. So take a look at it right down here on the bottom.
Hi, Rachel.
It's Rochelle. And she might come and bust your kneecap.
She's still a unicorn.
Oh, dude.
All right, guys. Talk to y'all later.
I've been calling you Rachel this whole time.
Me too.
You have a good one.
Sorry.
Talk to y'all later.
We're sorry.
Bye-bye.
She came to my WordCamp talk, and I still call her Rachel.
I know.